Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Ann Reardon and today we're making a 3D Winnie the Pooh cake with a big pot of honey, of course. To make Pooh you'll need chocolate cake, my vanilla buttercream and the template, and you'll find all of that on the howtocookthat.net website, and there's a link to that below and all the recipe details and everything is there for you. The template has your guide for cutting all the cake layers, but it's also got the template for cutting the cake boards. So you're going to need 2 cake boards for inside the cake and also a base board to put your cake on. Bake your cakes, let them cool, level them, and then cut around each piece of the template. This chocolate cake recipe is really moist and chocolatey, so that's why I use this one a lot. It is a good crowd pleaser and it's one of my favourite cakes personally. Put a little bit of buttercream onto your board and then add layer number 1 on top. Add a little bit of simple syrup. You don't need much with this cake because it's already so moist, but I like to add a little bit because it can dry out while you're carving a 3D cake. You can flavour your simple syrup with a little bit of honey for this cake, but you don't have to, you can just keep it plain. Top that with some buttercream. I'm using vanilla today, but there are lots of flavours of buttercream you could choose from my website, so just choose what's going to work for you and the people who are going to eat the cake. Try and get that as level as you can and then add your next layer. Line up where the legs are and put them in the same position, so then the front bit of the jar is coming a bit further forward and the body bit at the back is sticking out a little bit. Continue to stack up the layers, adding supports after layer 3. Just cut 4 cake pop sticks to the same height, push them in and add your cake board on top. Add the next 3 layers of cake and push in a cake pop stick to measure how deep that is down to the board. Cut 3 the same height, add the next cake board and the remaining layers of cake. Add the template in front and check your cake is the correct height. Then cut out the leg section of the template, put it back in place and cut around that leg shape. If you do the leg first, then you can sit the template further back against the body. Then just cut a little bit off, following the shape of the template around the cake. Turn the cake around and do the same thing with the side template. When you come to doing the head, I suggest you fold it at the level of the top of the pot so that you can get it right in there and cut just the shape of his nose and his head just right. Now that you've got the basic shape of the front and the side, you've just got the corners to do. Now you don't need to take much off here at all, just shave a tiny bit at a time to round out the pot shape so that you don't have any flat areas. Because I made the cake template for you for each layer, roughly the right size and shape, that really simplifies this carving process. So you're not just starting with a block of cake, you can actually see roughly where you need to go. The only bit that actually requires you to do a little bit of carving is the face, and that's because if you look at it, you've got his nose sticking out in the middle and then his 2 cheeks stick out either side, so it recesses a bit just here. So when you're cutting that, what you need to do is fold the template in half, put it against his face and cut a little bit out here and here. And again, it's not much, it's just the tiniest little bit off each side. Next, we want to cover the cake in buttercream. I like using an offset spatula just to spread a thin layer everywhere, all over the cake, on his feet and Winnie the Pooh's head. Put a circle cutter in the center of the honeypot and scrape away most of the buttercream from there so that you can see where the center of the pot is going to be. Now take some acetate and run it up and around the curved surfaces just to smooth them out. It's important to remember that the fondant will show the shape of the cake and the buttercream underneath. So if you're not happy with something, fix it now before you cover the cake in fondant. Fondant won't change the shape of what's underneath. You need to get this section right. So it should look like this. We've got his pot and his head and his face, of course, and his body. He's got no arms because we'll add them on last. The first thing we're going to cover with fondant is the pot. I've left my cake in the fridge for a few hours to firm up this buttercream, which makes it a bit easier to work with. But to make the fondant stick, you then need to add a tiny bit of water to the buttercream. Just add it to the pot section and nowhere else for the moment. Roll out a rectangle of blue and wrap it around your pot, and then straight away use your hands and your fingers just to smooth the fondant around the contours of your pot. On the sides, make a couple of cuts around the foot area and then gently press the fondant down right into those gaps there. If you have some fondant tools, that'll make this easier because you can use them just to get right into all those little gaps. If you don't have them, don't worry, just use the handle of a spoon. Look in your cutlery drawer and see what handle is the finest, what you've got that you can use in order to poke it gently in there. Then just use a knife to trim off the excess, always remembering to leave slightly more than you think you need. Trim off around the base of the pot and smooth it off. This doesn't have to be perfect at the base because we're going to add grass here later, so it's pretty much going to get covered up. Using a bowl, cut a circle of blue and add that to the top of the pot. Then use your circle cutter to cut out the middle section so we have room for the honey to go. Moisten the middle of your pot with a little bit of water and wrap it in a strip of lighter blue. You can of course change the colours of the pot to pink or purple or whatever else you choose. Roll out some Winnie the Pooh coloured fondant and spray the surface of it with cooking oil to stop it drying out too fast. Add a little bit of water to the face area and the back of the head and then drape the fondant over the top. Now you need to quickly lift and lower it to get rid of any creases or any bits that are sticking up there. Just lift it and lower it back in towards the head, smoothing it around with your hand as you go. Once you're happy with it, trim off any big bits of excess fondant and put them straight back in a plastic bag for later. Use your palms and your fingers to continue to smooth the fondant around the shape of his head and his little nose and cheeks and face. His nose does look a bit weird right now, but don't worry, it will look right once we add the black bit on top. Wrap another rectangle around the body, smoothing it around the leg. Make cuts in the base again just to make it easier to maneuver it where you need it to be. And once it's in place, you can just trim it all off just like we did for the pot. Moisten just under his neck with a tiny bit of water and then add a rectangle of red fondant with the top edge folded over all around his body, and this of course will be his red shirt. Cut the top section at the level of his collar and then wrap that around the front just on top of the pot there, and then push the rest of it in close to the pot and trim it off, and you of course want to do the same on the other side as well. Take some orange and roll it in your hands into an elongated teardrop and add it to the side like a big cartoony drip of honey coming out of the pot. Add a couple more and then flatten that down on the inside and then add a circle of orange into the center. Now because it's supposed to be liquid, it's not supposed to just be perfectly flat, so just draw a few indents on it so that it looks a bit more flowy and a bit more liquidy. Mix some of your orange with white to get a lighter shade and add a little bit to each drip like a highlight so it looks like it's shiny. Now for his arms, slightly flatten a cylinder of yellowy brown and place that on top of some red. And what you basically want to do here is just wrap up the top bit of the arm like you're wrapping a present, but just squash down the edges of the fondant and trim it off. Use a little bit of water to add it into place. Now if you don't want to stand here holding it in place while it sets on, just stick a little bit of spaghetti under his arm to give it a bit of support, and you can remove that later. Roll a ball of fondant and cut it in half to give you 2 even pieces. Round out the edge and then press your thumb into the flat side, and we're making his ear here if you hadn't guessed. Put it on your template and cut it to the height that it says. Once you've made them both, take a piece of spaghetti and stick it into the ear. You could use another cake pop stick here, but I like using something edible on these little pieces. Use your template to check where it goes and then push it into place, just pushing that spaghetti into the cake. Next is his eyes. Roll a ball of black and cut it in half to get 2 even pieces. You don't want uneven eyes. Roll each of them into a ball about the size of the circle on your template and then add them into place. Once they're both there, just add the tiniest bit of white, just the really smallest bit you can get, onto each eye so that it looks like he has that sparkle in his eye. Roll a snake of black and cut 2 short bits off it for the eyebrows and add them on. Take a piece of black for his nose and shape it to the size shown on the template, and then using a little bit of water, attach it right to the top of his nose section. That looks much more like a bear now. Take a thin snake of black and add it in the place for his mouth, and then add an extra tiny bit at the end of each one, just following the curve of his cheek around. Roll a snake of pale blue and use a ruler to cut lots of portions that are the same length, and use them to add the word honey misspelt on the front of the pot. Use a bit of pink powdered food colouring to brighten up his cheeks, and a little bit of brown to shade around his mouth, just using a dry paintbrush, you don't need any water on this, and shade in his ears and on his shirt. Basically anywhere where you think there should be shadows, accentuate them using the brown. To cover the board, colour the rest of the buttercream in green and pipe it all over the board. Now to do this, I'm using one of the Russian piping tips that I have. To see what the other 69 tips do, watch the video at the end of this one. And your Winnie the Pooh cake is ready for a grand adventure.
If anyone wants to clap, now is the time to do it.
Oh, I do like a party.
Click here to subscribe to my channel, here for the Russian piping tips video, here for more cakes, and here for the latest video. Make it a great week, and I'll see you on Friday.